And welcome to People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marire. In the last edition of the program, we began a discussion on the landmark judgment of July 11th by the Supreme Court on the status of local governments. Today, we shall focus on how to give full effect to that judgment and other issues that have been thrown up by it. And in the wake of that Supreme Court judgment, which emphasized the sanctity of democratically elected local government councils, many states have been in a mad rush to conduct local government council elections. As of the last count, over 15 states have either conducted or have scheduled local government elections to hold as soon as possible. This is, of course, triggered by the fact that no allocations will be released from the Federation account to unelected local councils henceforth, as implied by that Supreme Court judgment. However, the Supreme Court judgment appears to have addressed only a part of the challenges with local government administration since Nigeria's return to democracy 25 years ago. The judgment may have, in fact, brought to the fore the many other issues that need to be addressed to guarantee genuine and meaningful autonomy for local governments as a third tier of government. The first is how to prize off the local governments from the administrative chokehold of state governments. As it is today, states exercise absolute control over local government councils through the Local Government Service Commission, which recruits staff for all local government councils and determines their schemes of service. Those commissions are usually under the supervision of commissioners for local government and chieftaincy affairs. Second is the existence, composition, funding, and operations of state independent electoral commissions, otherwise known as SIECs. Some have suggested that their functions should be turned over to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, via a constitutional amendment, given the sham elections that have been conducted over time. But is it not possible to shield them, that is the SIECs, from the control of state governors by strengthening their status, that is by providing for their financial and administrative independence, just like INEC, through a legislative intervention? Already, the Senate is moving to establish a local government election commission. Now, does this solution lie with creating another central electoral body, specifically for the conduct of local government elections? A third issue is the question of the capacity of elected and administrative local government officials and officers. The perception at present is that the local governments are poorly managed because of the low capacity at that level. People are handpicked and foisted on the local governments by governors and political godfathers without regard for their capacities and capabilities to perform in such roles. How can this be redressed? How can the local governments be made genuinely independent and perform their roles as centers of development as envisaged in the 1999 Constitution? These are many more issues we shall have had our minds to on this edition of the program. And I'm joined in the studio by Mr. Innocent Lagi, a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Nasarawa State. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me.
Great having you. We're also joined by Honorable Chijoke Edoga. Honorable Edoga, a former member of the House of Representatives in Nigeria, was the Labour Party governorship candidate in Enugu State in the 2023 general election. Thank you so much, Honorable Edoga, for joining us.
Thank you, Moni, for having me.
And we'll also be joined online from Lafia in Nasarawa State by Honorable Samuel Akala Gajere. He's a two-time chairman of the Karu local government area of Nasarawa State. Thank you so much, Honorable Gajere, for finding time to join us.
Thank you.
Right, we do understand that, in fact, local government administrators are meeting in Lafia at this point in time, but you have taken out time to join us on the program. So let's begin this way, Mr. Lagi. Maybe we should begin with one or two of the current issues that are related in a way to the issues that we're going to be talking about today. First is the issue of the minimum wage, and then, of course, we will also be talking about the decision of the Senate to establish a local government elections commission. But let's begin with the minimum wage issue. 70,000. Some have said 70,000 naira is not a living wage, but the organized labor appears to be satisfied with that.
It depends on what part of the world you are and what kind of country you're on. 70,000 for all intents and purposes is a lot of money. But when you do the maths, realistically, 70,000 per month for the 20 working days in a week comes down to just about 3,333 naira per day as a minimum wage for everybody. Reasonable, yes, for the laborer on the street and for other people. If you go further to do it per hour, we're looking at about 250 naira per hour of wage. Now, that is a lot of time in a human being's life that you put towards the service of another person. Now, the question is, if you put all this together, the minimum wage in Nigeria per day is less than $2 per day. Now, the question is, what will 300 or 3,333 naira do for anybody under this economy? Now, it is good for an industry like the government civil service, which is less than about 15% of the total population of the country. So if you raise minimum wage, governments will struggle to pay. The federal government will try to comply. State governments will struggle to pay. Local governments may not be able to pay. Now, that is on the one part, and all of this put together is just about 20% of the total population. So the effect of this intervention affects only about 20% in real time, because government will have to implement its laws and policy. But you take it to the private sector, for example, which takes about, let's look at another 40,000. Forget the partisan farmers, those that are not engaged in any formal sector. Let's say 60% of the population is in the informal sector. Those will not be affected by this minimum wage. Businesses are closing up in Nigeria. The cost of energy is high. Everybody is trying to just remain afloat. You now increase expenditure on businesses by passing a law that compels them to pay more wages than they were paying before. When you can't pay for, the cost of power now is equivalent or even worse than when you are generating your own power in an industry. The cost of energy is high. You have higher taxes. You are taxed by local government, touts, talks, and everybody. Businesses, this is the most, Nigeria, I will say this with all sense of responsibility, is the most unfriendly place to do business, because I do business. I'm a lawyer, you sit in your office, you have to bribe the police to do things, you have to go to the courts to pay for dates. Nothing works, no business works, judgments don't come on time, proceedings of court are not happening, people are giving up on the formal sector. Now, we now can then put all these amounts of money we're going to be paying in minimum wage. You pay to only a section of the population. If you want to get something that will effectively affect every Nigerian, then we'll be looking at what is the minimum payment for the 200 million people we have in the country. But if you're just going to insist on paying just about between 30 and 40% that are going to benefit, what do you do with that? Let me make this point before you ask. Let me make this point before. Let me make this submission before you pay. And this 30% we're looking at that is mostly government, produce nothing. The civil service is completely redundant from federal to state local government. So we're going to be paying all this money to a service that does not provide any economic, civil, or national service. That is worth that payment. The only other people that are productive in this country are not even entitled to the minimum wage. For example, let's look at our farmers who produce every food we eat in this country. Let's look at our taxi drivers who commute people from one place to the other. None of those people will be entitled to any of this increase in minimum wage. In fact, prices will go up and they will be affected, not because they are beneficiaries of this policy or this minimum wage law that will be passed. So,
Does the minimum wage law not also impose an obligation on the organized private sector to operate it?
The company income tax puts an obligation on them. The VAT that we've increased put an obligation on them. The increase in the bans or the cost of electricity puts a burden on them. Payment of ground rent and all the other levies they pay are obligations by government. So how much do you make in an economy where people don't have money to pay for food? I mean, if I run a food business, for example, and my customers earn the minimum of 3,300 naira per day, how much will they buy of that? In any case, what is the produce other than agricultural produce in this country that is not imported from abroad? And if we import it from abroad, how much will a $2 buy for you? Or who is coming to do business in a country where people's statutory earnings, which is the minimum, is about $2.
Okay, Honorable Edoga, let me bring you in here. I'm sure you want to weigh in on this minimum wage issue. But in addition to that, I also like you to comment on the decision of the members of the House of Representatives yesterday to cut their basic salary by 50% for 6 months as part of their contribution to alleviating the hardship in the country at the moment.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The arrival at 70,000 as minimum wage took a process that we're all aware of. The organized labor was involved, ministers were involved, the governors were involved, the president was involved. So it took a process that has given it a certain level of legitimacy. And if the leaders of the organized labor think that it's something they can start with, they will have to work with it, because it's even better than what we had just a few before now. There's improvements, even if it's not significant, even if it does not address the issue, the current existential challenges. I think that what the government needs to do is to begin to make sure, or insist, or try, that other supportive infrastructures or social services, like schools, primary schools, they work, and they're available to the poor or those in the lower strata of the society. That healthcare services are available at very reduced prices or costs, that people can access their farms. A significant part of what has happened at this point in time is that people cannot access their farms. The food insecurity we are hearing, all the measures to import food temporarily are just because the farms are not accessible again. The insecurity is just, you can feel it, it's perceptible, it's something you can touch. So we can look at the environment, make transport easy and accessible and reduced cost. Healthcare, primary school, secondary school, at reduced prices. If all these other supportive and supporting infrastructure or services are available at reasonable prices, then the wages is something that they can also manage and live with.
And bring down food inflation.
Yes, and for me, if the leaders of the organized labor, having seen the process that it went through, accept it, it's okay by me. Because today, if they begin to implement it, it's better than yesterday. I also note that yesterday, members of the House of Reps agreed to surrender for 6 months a part of their remunerations. I also note the statement from former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, saying that instead of their salaries, they should have touched the allowances, giving the impression that the allowances are more substantial But most important thing for me is that sacrifice has been made. That there's a sense, it's a recognition. It may be tokenism, but it recognizes the fact from National Assembly members, House of Reps, has sent a message that recognizes that things are hard and there are things need to be done. Sacrifices, it's a sacrifice. So sacrifices need to be made. This sacrifice may be big or small, depending on where you are. For instance, if they are giving part of their salary, the president can also decide to forego the presidential plane. The National Assembly members can also forego purchase of big vehicles for luxury vehicles, Nigerian-made vehicles. So the important thing, the message that has been sent out is that sacrifices are important, especially for those who are well placed to do. In order to communicate the message across, that they understand, there's empathy. We connect to your sufferings, and we're ready to forgo something to give you the impression that we're all parts of this community.
All right, Mr. Lage, I'd like to bring you in on that issue. The decision by the House members to cut their basic salaries by 50%.
I think it's an insult to the country. I mean, it also takes us to the incompetence of the people in government in Nigeria. I mean, their wages and allowances are set out, and a report is made by the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission. Now, that is only where you can cut that. But if you take these huge salaries and allowances and you look at the country you're supposed to govern, and meanwhile, I'll read a section of the Constitution that, in the words of the Constitution, they are supposed to serve the country, protect, make sure there's security, make sure there's all other things. Then you decide you're going to cut down your salaries. Now, where will this money be sent to? How will it be implemented? To what end it is? Because now it is a gift of their salaries to whoever they want to give it and however they want to give it. Will it go back to the consolidated revenue of the Federation and then it will be appropriated? And when it goes back, what will it be? Gift from members of the National Assembly? Because their salaries and emolument cannot change except if the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission decides, as of law, says that, look, we think you are taking too much in this country, the cost of running the legislature is high, and we therefore cut it down to this amount. Other than that, nothing is realistically happening, except, of course, if we continue to accept that this is not a country of laws, that people just dash out what they take of the national wealth to the people. So this is a favor to us with the resources that belong to us when it's supposed to be evenly distributed in such a way that it preserves the lives of every citizen of this country. If they want to do this, the president can talk with the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission and say, look, cut down salaries of public office holders across board. It is realistic. It is real. In fact, they are the only people in this country who can still survive if their minimum wages are cut. Every other person wants a raise. So it means from inception, there was an unequitable distribution of payments for people who provide almost no service, take much more than the people who are providing every service in this country.
All right. I'm hoping that we'll be able to reconnect with Mr. Gajere, who was with us a while ago. But while we wait to get him in, let me begin this other session by asking one very relevant question. Does Nigeria have a three-tier federal system?
No, it has only two. The Constitution makes it very clear.
Well, I asked that question because that controversy has arisen since the Supreme Court judgment. And I went back and looked at the Constitution. And I looked at Section 2 of the Constitution, which said, Section 2, subsection 2, which says Nigeria shall be a federation consisting of states and a federal capital territory. Consisting of states and a federal capital territory.
Now that section is also still a little vague because you don't federate between states and the FCT only. I think there is an omission of saying the federal, states, and the FCT because FCT is defined under the Constitution as a state. So it's the 37th state in Nigeria. So definitely the federal system of Nigeria is between two tiers of government. I mean, between the two tiers of government primarily. The federating units in Nigeria is the state and the federal government. So you have, and that is defined by the legislative list that we have, because that is how you you federate power. We have the National Assembly, then we have state assemblies, and we do not have anyone below that is recognized by the Constitution. So we federate between the federal government and the state governments. But then we have local governments that constitute the state. And functions, as I said at our last discussion, functions are assigned to the recognition is given to the local governments, and functions are assigned to them. There is the power under the 1999 Constitution to the state assemblies to make laws for the governance of that tier of government. But we can come back and discuss federation in Nigeria, but it is distinguishable with the federating units in the US. For example, each of the states in the US existed as a nation on its own, as a republic. Then they came together and got amalgamated. So the nature of the states in America is not the same with the nature of the states in Nigeria, because by the time we got independence and the 1999 Constitution came as one country, all these states were under a particular colonial administration. So we had a federal colonial government at that time. We did not come together to form Nigeria at independence. So at that point, we have a federal government and we had loose state government. And basically, that is what we inherit. So to try to equate what we have in Nigeria with what is going on in America has been what has been confusing our understanding of the Nigerian federalism. It is pretty unique from what we have under the U.S. Constitution that we borrowed from.
Now, that has placed some kind of confusion, so to say, in our understanding of the Nigerian federalism, because all along we talk about a three-tier federal system of government. But the Constitution seems to suggest otherwise, that where in fact the states are the federating units and the local governments, and as we have been treating them, are not a tier of government.
Yeah, let us not conflate our ideas, our ideals of what a true federalism is, a true federal structure, or what the textbooks say the true federal structure is or should be, with what we have in Nigeria. What we have in Nigeria is that, in fact, that there exists a three-tier structure of three. The federation, the states, and the LGAs. The LGAs are written into the Constitution. The names are there, itemized. Issues concerning LGAs are in the Constitution, from joint revenue, joint accounts, to the fact that democratically elected local government or councils should be maintained. So from beginning of the Constitution to the end, references are made continuously to the local governments in such a way that you will not wish them away or pretend they don't exist because they don't agree with the ideas we have of what an ideal federal structure is. Nigeria, as he said, is operating a unique structure. And maybe the effort is ongoing to clearly begin to make it a proper federal system or structure. If our peculiar national characteristics will let us get to that point. So it's a three-tier structure. It's evident. It's undeniable. Because the Constitution, even the names of local governments, are entrenched in the Constitution. So, and the Constitution continuously refers to matters relating to local governments in a way that gives them almost equal weight with the states. So what else will be done for you to know that it's not a federation of two, the states and the center? It's a three-tier structure.
Yeah. If what you say is correct, and of course is supported by provisions of the Constitution, Section 6, for instance, which clearly specifies that there shall be 768 local government areas in Nigeria, as shown in the second column of councils, and then 6 area councils in the Constitution. And then, of course, Section 7, subsection 1, which also mentions local governments by democratically elected councils under the Constitution as guaranteed.
Yes.
Why is it that over time, local government administrations appear, or have been, not just appear, have been head in the stranglehold of state governments?
Okay, let me just start this particular segment of this discussion by thanking especially the Attorney General of the country, and even the President, who gave him the leeway to take the matter to the Supreme Court, and enabled us to get this judgment that has become a focal point in the country. Before 1999 Constitution came into play, about 97-98, the INEC, the version of INEC then, conducted elections nationwide for council chairman. I was a beneficiary of that arrangement. I ran an election under UNCP about 1998 or thereabouts. And the elections were relatively free and fair, and it ushered us in, and the products had done fairly well over the country. I was a product of that arrangement. Ike Kremada was a product of that arrangement. So, it's just what happened that since 1999, when civilians or elected governors came in, they began to act outside the spirit, contrary to the spirit of the Constitution. Because there's nothing in the Constitution that everything in the Constitution was specifically made, entrenched to guarantee free and fair election, but acted in breach. Actions have been in breach since then, and nothing has happened since then to make sure that they were checked. Not too long ago, a chairman of a local government in Ogun State drew attention to the anomalies in the system. The EFCC fell on him, the governor clamped on him, and he was removed. So this particular judgment has concentrated national attention on the anomalies that exist and issues that are now, what do we do to build on the judgment? Because there are still things that need to be done.
All right. Mr. Lagi, the local governments, as they were, at least until July 11, when that Supreme Court judgment came, was such that every state has a local government service commission.
Yeah.
And the local government service commissions are the ones that are in charge of all the administrative processes and procedures at local government level.
Yes.
Even when you have elected council officials.
Yes.
And those commissions are under the purview of a commissioner who reports to a state governor.
Yes.
Now, with this judgment, what will happen to such commissions?
It depends on what we are looking at generally. The power to make laws for how local governments are still governed is still under Section 7 of the Constitution, still goes to the House of Assembly. If the House of Assembly decide that there should be a commission, in any case, the Local Government Service Commission is a service commission like the Civil Service Commission. Now, will it be desirable, for example, to have each local government have its own staff commission? For example, you have a Wamba Local Government Service Commission, and you have 700 and those commissions across the country for the purposes of employment, discipline, and conditions of service of local government. Is that desirable? Is a conversation that each state will have. But for now, with the powers of the House of Assembly under Section 7 of the Constitution, and the worrying aspect that the National Assembly is trying to create a local government election commission, it's completely an aberration and actually an unconstitutional activity being thought of. I refer to you to Article 22 of the exclusive legislative list, which clearly states that election to the list says the National Assembly shall exclusively make laws under items under this list. Article 22 states that they can make laws in respect of election to the office of the President, Vice President, or Governor, and under this, or Governor, Deputy Governor, and any other office to which a person may be elected under this Constitution, excluding, that's the keyword, elections to a local government councillor or any office in such council. Now, it says councillor. It didn't say council, but it went on to say any other elections in that council. Does this section or does this article exclude the office of the chairman of that council? So can we have the National Assembly, for example, if you take this into cognizance in making a law of the National Assembly, can you be able to argue that the councillor referred to under article, and this could be wrong, the councillor mentioned in Article 22 of the exclusive legislative list exclude elections of chairman to the council. So if the Constitution exempt or excludes the powers of the National Assembly to make laws for elections into local government councils, therefore the National Assembly cannot make those laws, because Section 7 of the Constitution is very clear as to who or what organ of government or what tier of government has powers to make laws for the creation and management of local government councils. So it still goes back to the state houses of assembly to continue to do that. In fact, under the organs of government, the State Independent Election Commission is also recognized by the Constitution, so you can't wish it away. And if it is a state, if it is an executive arm of a state government, and it is, if, for example, there were the provision of Article 22 did not exist, one can then say the National Assembly can, under the concurrent legislative list, make similar provisions with a NASEG or House of Assembly of a state as to how local government elections can be conducted. But the Constitution clearly excludes the National Assembly from taking any steps, from making any laws that regulates elections into local government councils in the state.
You know, as you speak, I was smiling because I know that the Honorable Edoga has canvassed a position that in a way appears to be different from yours. You have advocated, for instance, that that Section 197 of the Constitution, subsection 1, should be deleted from the Constitution by the National Assembly, and Section 153, subsection 1, should be amended to empower INEC.
Yes.
That is the current INEC to
Yes.
conduct elections into local governments.
Yes.
But the Senate appears to be doing something different.
Yes.
By suggesting, or in fact, they have proposed a bill which has gone through first reading to say, look, let us set up a local government elections commission.
Yes.
Independent of INEC.
That proposal flies against the face of the ongoing efforts at the national level to reduce commissions and government agencies. That's what we hear that is ongoing. To merge, to reduce.
Yes,
to implement it. So you can't be saying that you want to reduce, at the same time trying to create, especially when INEC, over time, has, the institutional memory is there, the capacity is there, it has done it before now. In 1997, I said that, I don't know that it was INEC then, but a national electoral body conducted an election where I participated, and it received near universal applause. So I don't agree. I don't agree that an independent, another body should be created to do what INEC has done over time, and what it can be just be prodded to do better. What we just need to do regards to election is to make sure, insist that instantaneous transmission of results are achieved, and we're good to go. So I don't agree with what the ongoing. I suspect that maybe there's more to it, because if there's not more to it, what is common sense? What is commonsensical is that INEC should be asked to do it, because they have done it and they can do it. I also want to make comments on a Local Government Services Commission. If we are moving towards autonomy of local governments, then we should treat Local Government Services Commission as a transitory body, a body that exists for now, because there's a bit of confusion on whether we should allow autonomy to be there or not. Because as he said, Local Government Services Commission are concerned with issues of employment, transfer of services, discipline and promotion. If these LGAs are really autonomous, you have no business with what happens in the local governments, which is what the Local Government Service Commission do, coordinate relationship across the local governments. It brings me to what happened when I was the chairman in about 1998 or thereabouts. The professor who was in charge of Local Government Services Commission found out that there was quite a good amount of national income coming to my local government, began to transfer teachers, staff from other LGAs where maybe they are not being paid on time and all that. So I protested. I told him that this money is coming to issues of local government from the federal government. And if there's a surplusage of after paying salaries, then we can do other infrastructure. So we had a big fallout, and I maintained my. It was a military government, and he looked at my argument and said I had an argument, had a point. So that those mass movements of people were suspended. So really, there's not much the Local Government Services Commission will do where proper autonomy exists, because each LGA will be capable of running its affairs. In addition to Local Government Services Commission, there's also a body concerned with managing teacher salaries, because the experience is that the some council chairmen, over time, refused to pay salaries of these teachers. So a body was created that took the money up front from the councils and then make sure that teachers were well paid. So these creations, in as much as they rub off on autonomy of councils, the exigencies arise from a peculiar Nigerian cultural situations. If people, for instance, pay the teachers as I went to because the money is there, then there won't be any need for a state-controlled education body that pays teachers. There won't be need for a Local Government Services Commission that manages transfers. Because ideally, all the people who work in a local government should come from that local government. Ideally. It's autonomous. It's independent. But that's not what obtains now. You have people from all parts of local government mixing one LG and the other. Maybe for whatever reasons you can substitute, but ideally, that's not how it ought to be. If autonomy, independence actually exists at that level. So it's Local Government Service Commission is a phase that will go eventually when autonomy comes.
When autonomy comes, Mr. Lage, from a legal point of view, what the Senate is doing now through the introduction of this bill that seeks to establish the Local Government's Independent Elections Commission, will it not require a constitutional amendment? The various aspects of the Constitution, which I talked about, Section 190, Section 197, subsection 1, Section 153, subsection 1, and the articles of that schedule that you just talked about, will it not require amending or, in fact, deleting those aspects from the Constitution for the independent, Local Government Independent Election Commission to come into existence? Will it just be as simple as passing a bill in the National Assembly and passing it on to the President for his assent?
The National Assembly cannot pass that bill. If it passes that bill will ultra varies the Constitution, and if it is ultra varies the Constitution, it is null and void ab initio. So let's not even ponder on that and waste time thinking that they have the power to do that. I hope they listen, and I hope they check Article 22 of the Constitution, and they will understand they can't waste public funds, public time on trying to do what it is completely unconstitutional. They can't. Now, the question is, are there existing mechanisms under the Constitution to strengthen the system as it is? Absolutely, yes. I would disagree with my brother on the other side that local governments can be autonomous. If you want to make local government autonomous, there are too many issues that are at stake. For example, I make a reference to it. If you have a Local Government Service Commission, what law will create it and what law will back it? But I'll take you back to Section 7 of the Constitution and see if we can even be able to amend that right now. Because the National Assembly alone is not the single body that can amend the Constitution. So if state assemblies disagree, as required by the Constitution on these amendments, these sections will remain perpetually. And I think if you try to erode too much power from the state and give it to the federal government, the state will resist. And for good reasons too, because we cannot, in a vast country and diverse country like Nigeria, to concentrate power on one arm of government or one tier of government is not desirable, considering our peculiarity. But let's take a look at Section 7, what it says from the beginning, so that we can make this simple. Section 7, subsection 1 mentions that a system of local government by democratically elected local government council is under this constitution guarantee. And accordingly, the government of every state, not the federal government, the government of every state. The government of every state means the executive, legislative, and the judicial government of the state, subject to subsection 8 of this constitution, ensure, first of all, their existence under a law which provides for the establishment, structure, composition, finance, and functions of such councils. Even the composition of the council itself is subject to a legislation by the House of Assembly. And unless you want to introduce another list for local government legislative bodies, local governments will continuously be lawfully governed by laws made by the House of Assembly of a state. I mentioned that last time. Bylaws by local governments are not themselves substantive law per se. They are mostly persuasive and they are the least, and that is why they are called bylaws. So for now, every law that will be recognized by the Constitution as enforceable, strictly speaking, will be laws made by the National Assemblies and laws made by the Houses of Assembly. For this purpose, the entire power to structure local government, the composition of local government, executive, finances of local government, and functions of local government shall be determined by the State House of Assembly, because it said the government of the state. It didn't say the government of Nigeria. If you want to divide that, you then go to Chapter 2 of the Constitution that gives certain classic objective of government and their responsibility and so on and so forth.
So flowing from that, Mr. Lagi,
Yeah.
Does that not purely make a nonsense of the ruling of the Supreme Court?
Not at all. Not at all. Let me answer this question. As I said last time, the judgment of the Supreme Court is classic. The problem we have with this country, and with apologies to everybody who meant everything the National Assembly did in good faith, it's the demystification of the supremacy of the Constitution. We have tampered with this Constitution so much, we have disrespected this Constitution so much that we no longer reverse its provisions in this country. Basically, that is it. We are trashing the Constitution. We are trashing both the Constitution and the place of Constitution in our national lives. Other than that, it's a classic judgment. Resources are different from powers. The Constitution is very clear that the resources of this country shall be shared. The words were used between the federal, state, and local governments. And that judgment was about the finances of the federation. It has nothing to do on how they are composed, how the finances are going to be spent. It is about the finances. So if you take this a little further, it also tried to include that even the budget, and we go back to that sometime, even the budgets of local government before an appropriation is properly so-called by local government, it may have to be passed by the House of Assembly of the state. Because Section 7 makes provision that even the finances of the local government will be subject to a law passed by the House of Assembly of the state. Will that be desirable? Absolutely. Can the local council propose a budget and then lay it before the House of Assembly for consideration and passage? I think that is a classic thing to do.
What happens to the legislative councils of the local governments?
As I said, their function is purely checking check and balancing the local government administration.
They do not have powers to approve the budgets of the local government
The
councils?
Constitution did not say that they have. If a state House of Assembly law provides, for example, that councillors can approve the finances of local government, it becomes law. Because what the Constitution is saying in Section 7 is they will make provisions for composition finances of the local government. So if there is a law of the State Assembly that says this is how the council of the local government, which is the structure of the local government, and empower them to consider the finances of the local government in this and this manner, then it becomes law and it is now practicable for the local councils to then do that. Because they will then be empowered by the House of Assembly that is properly empowered.
Which is why I'm asking the question, whether or not this financial autonomy is not an illusion after all.
You know, it's not an illusion. When I was the chairman of issues of local government, about 1997, 98, monies meant for my local government came straight to my account. Straight. And,
to the local government account?
Yes, to the local government account,
okay.
issues account, the local government account. All it needed to be done was for the secretary, the chairman, and the treasurer to agree and sign. 3 of us must sign, and then we begin to expend. Until I became the commissioner for local governments, I never heard about Jack. I didn't know what Jack meant, because within my own sphere, within the time when I was chairman, it was not there. And there was accountability, because the state government had oversight through the auditors, the audit departments, an internal audit of the local government, and the state audit that comes once in a while to review what we had done. So from 1999, the state governments began to give a different interpretation to that 126 subsection that says that monies should be paid into a joint account. The Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court did was to reiterate the spirit, the intendment of that provision. That provision was not meant for the governors to hijack, to take the money, seize it, as has happened since 1999, all over the country. The national applause that welcomed that judgment shows very well that it has captured the spirit of the times. Because the continuing seizure of those monies everywhere, had terrible effects on a substantial part of our people with regards to rural urban migration, insecurity, unemployment, drug abuse, whatever. A very strong component of Nigerian country were gradually going. So that judgment had captured the intendments of that law, that provision in the Constitution, that money should pass through joint state account, not for the states to take over, but for the states to augment, because it's a cooperative federalism. There are areas where the states and the LGAs cooperate, and willingly the LGAs maybe cede their powers. For instance, maybe tenements, maybe advertising, they cede their powers to the states. Okay, collect on our behalf. Such monies are now put together, and the states will pay into LGA's account. So the intendment of that provision was very clear. But for reasons, for the peculiar Nigerian situation, the governors over time took charge of those monies. The Supreme Court's decision is okay. That judgment is okay. What needs to be done now is to take it further. Because one of my friends who commented, said, what has happened is a change of signature. What has happened is a change of signature. That if you don't strengthen the LGAs, nothing will happen. So it behoves on civil society, it behoves on the further amendments, for instance, as I recommended, that elections are important. Because if, for instance, governors, they are rushing to do elections now, conduct elections, those things are just window dressing. Because they will sit down, write names of the chairman and councils, and you announce that it has been done. You'll be sitting there, and announcements will be made, elections have been done. This person has won. So these persons, of course, would keeping to pre-arrangements, will transmit these monies one way or the other back to the governors. So in order to build on this judgment, it's important that the process through those chairmen emerge and councils emerge should be strengthened. If it needs a constitutional amendment, transferring electoral powers to INEC, and that's what I prefer. Electoral amendment to electoral situation should be effected in order to do a modicum of free and fair election. Free and fair election will bring in independent-minded persons like myself. I was elected in a free and fair election, and I went around, I campaigned, I made promises, I made covenants, and throughout my chairman for 14 months, I made sure that I kept to my promises. I restored credibility to governance. So Even if there are 2 or 3 or 4 that fail out of 17, it's still a plus. And if you have, because what is the state outside local governments? If you have all the LGAs performing optimally, the jobs of state governors are reduced. So it's in the best interest of the country, it's the best of everybody that you have a free and fair election at the local government level that serves the interest of bringing people who canvass, go around and campaign. Then the people will decide by themselves, not cronies of governors, not people who go to promise or swear oaths or all sorts before they have been announced. Free and fair election creates an environment and a situation that brings out the best out of all those who are contesting. And when you have made promises as you're campaigning, whether you like it or not, willy-nilly, you are compelled, you are impelled to fulfill your promises. If out of 17 LGAs, for instance, in Enugu State, 10 are performing optimally, building roads, building bridges, doing everything that the Constitution asks LGAs to do, and more, the impact, the effect will be phenomenal. And if it happens across the states, even if there's 774 LGAs, even if 500 are operating optimally, it's going to be big, massive in effect. So I think that the Constitution should be amended to allow INEC to take over the elections to the councils. It's a necessary corollary to that judgment, without which that judgment remains incorrect substantially.
Mr. Lage, the way forward.
I mean, we
rounding off our discussion.
we can have. We're going to have the same people in Nigeria who are going to run the federal, state, or local government. So it is important to be very practical about these issues. Nigeria cannot be governed as a unitary state. It's completely impossible. We have attempted regional, we have attempted unitary, we have come back to a federal system that's, that appears to suit the peculiarity of the composition of the country. Now, it is also likely going to be impossible. It is possible, but probably not under our democratic system, under the 1999 Constitution, to amend this Constitution and take away state powers and accumulate all on the federal government, or to remove the state as a tier of government and make the local governments as a second tier of government. But you see, all the benefits of all we are talking about can be achieved. And I've given you an example. Let's go to the basis, one of the interpretation given by the Supreme Court, because I think we're not talking about it. How is the management of these resources that are going to be the local government going to be coordinated? How will they be, what regulations are there to make sure that the monies go there, they stay there, and they do the things that the monies were meant for? I think those are the follow-up we need to begin to discuss and innovate ways to see how the implementation of this judgment will be in such a way that it will be successful. Not necessarily trying to now want to do an amendment when we have an interpretation that seeks to deal with the problem that we had. So we will continue to develop this federal system until such a time that we have removed even the overburdening powers of the federal government on the state governments, remove those overburdening powers from the state, from the local government, from the states. So let's look at section 162, subsection 3.
Very quickly, we have less than a minute to
I'll
go.
do that. That section says, any amount standing to the credit of the federal government shall be distributed amongst the federal, state, and local government councils in each state on such terms and in such a manner that may be prescribed this time around by the National Assembly. Now, what kind of account must local governments operate before these monies are transmitted to them can be done. Instead of wasting time on this independent commission for local government elections, we can then go to putting the necessary legislation that will help implement in such a successfully implement the Supreme Court judgment. So what kind of accounts must local governments operate that these funds can be transmitted to? Section 162, subsection 3 empowers the National Assembly to have control on how the resources of the federation allocated to the local governments will be expended or will be managed. Now, it makes provision for the terms upon which they will be paid. So if you have a law and says the term of the payment of this money to this particular account is having an election that is credibly observed and confirmed to be credible, then that is a term for payment. Okay. That will be distinguishable.
Right, we have to go, Mr. Lage. Okay. Our time is up. This is an ongoing discussion.
No final word from me.
Can you do that in 15 seconds?
A free and fair election guarantees the return of those who have failed.
But
guarantees the recall of those who have failed. Is a check. Secondly, until we restructure and the way they are deal, we have to improve on what we have.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. Like I said, this is an ongoing discussion. We'll come back to it some other time. But we want to thank you immensely for finding time to join us this Friday. Mr. Innocent Lagi, former Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice of Nasarawa State. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having
Honorable
me.
Chijoke Edoga, as a former member of the House of Representatives and was the governorship candidate of the Labour Party in the 2023 governorship elections in Enugu State, a former local government chairman, a former commissioner of Enugu State also. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Right?
Thank you,
And unfortunately, because of the global downtime that is raging around the world, we have been unable to have Honorable Samuel Akala Gajere, who is the two-time chairman of Karu local government area of Nasarawa State, joining us fully on this program. Well, for you, our viewers, thank you so much for investing your time with us. We'll see you again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics and Power. Bye for now.